Well, welcome everybody to the September episode of our Roundtable for Customer-Led Growth series. We're thrilled to be having a conversation today with Brent Adamson, and we'll introduce Brent in just a minute, but I think the topic is very timely now because we've been talking for a while about how the effectiveness of traditional marketing and sales techniques is just declining. And Brent has written books on the topic. He's written some interesting Harvard Business Review articles about the topic, and actually feels that it should be made more obsolete, and we should be embracing a new way of thinking as it pertains to how we acquire, engage, and grow customers. So that's going to be the topic for today. Before I introduce Bill, my co-host, I just wanted to make sure everybody knows that we are a week and a half, or I guess we're 2 weeks away. No, actually, no, we're a week away. I take that back, from Customer XCon 2022, which starts next Tuesday in Boston at Artists for Humanity. It's the conference for customer-led growth and for people that want to do that in their organization. So we only have about 10 spots left for anybody that hasn't registered yet. We'd really love to see you there. So with that, let me just introduce Bill Lee. Bill is the thought leader in the customer marketing and advocacy space. And I've been working with Bill for, I'd say, the last 4 or 5 years now on really trying to elevate the profession and really inspire and educate and show people how they can connect more of what they do as customer marketing and advocacy professionals to the strategic growth initiatives that their C-level executives care about, which is even way more important now with all this talk about recessions and some cutting of travel budgets and things like that is going on in companies. So with that, Bill, welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Do I need to screen share or shall I just launch?
Why don't you just launch? I'm sharing my screen. I will actually stop right now, and we will go back to just seeing people on camera. And just, I forgot to say one housekeeping note, which is, please, if you have any questions at any time throughout the session, type them into the chat session, or if you'd like to ask them live, raise your hand in the chat session and we'll call on you.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Jeff. I'm going to pretty much dispense with the preliminaries and just go right ahead and introduce our special guest. Because I want to lay this, allow as much time as possible to interact with this guy. So many of you are familiar, I'm sure, with the challenger sales and with the challenger customer. These are like, they've become iconic books in helping companies to deal with the exceptional complexity that's crept in and rushed in, really, especially with the internet, rushed in with complexity. It's very complex to be a buyer. It's very complex these days to be a customer. And this is something that needs to come to the fore for customer marketing and customer success. It's not just the job of salespeople to deal with this. It's not just the job of product people to deal with this. I think even more important is getting customer marketing and customer success dealing with this issue as well. And the reason it's important, it's not just something that you got to do. It's kind of like doing homework or something, or it's kind of like doing the chores or something. It's not that at all. It's an exciting area for opening up new value to customers and to buyers that they're not getting from many companies. So Brent, a little bit about him. Brent is co-author of the two books that I just mentioned, and Jeff also alluded to a Harvard Business Review he wrote earlier this year called Traditional Marketing. Traditional marketing is increasing. Marketing and sales. Traditional marketing and sales is becoming increasingly obsolete. And here's the deal: with these concepts, and that is that a lot of people, these were huge best-selling books, but a lot of companies have yet to adopt its principles. So what you've got is in organizations that continue to use the old ways of organizing themselves, of motivating people, of setting up their organizations and so forth, that fits the old customer, but it's at odds with the new customer. That's the reality today. So the need here for customer marketing and customer success folks is to navigate this, get skilled at navigating this. And that's what we're talking to, that's going to be one of the things we talk to Brent about. So Brent, distinguished thinker, researcher in this space, the two great books, Harvard Business Review, his firm with Matt Dixon and I guess a couple of other folks were the ones that developed and provided the infrastructure for all this incredible research and conclusions about the way buyers and customers work today. And they were acquired finally by the big whale, the Gartner Group, for who knows how much money. And so Brent was an executive at Gartner for a while, but his roots are in being entrepreneurial, being agile, being able to go where his instincts tell him to go in his research. So he's now working for a company called Ecosystems. And Ecosystems provides value management services. I'd be interested to know how many of you are familiar with that or have value management in your firms. But I'm just really kind of learning about it here recently. But it's something that's tied very closely to what you guys are doing as well. So with that, please welcome Brent Adamson. It's great to hear you, Brent.
Thanks, Bill. It's great to be here. And Jeff and everyone, howdy. By the way, I've got the chat box open here on one of my 4 screens, so feel free to throw your comments in there. Bill, if I could say, I was real quick, just mention, so the company I was at prior to being acquired by Gartner was a company called CEB, or Corporate Executive Board, and specifically in the sales practice. And the only reason I want to mention that, I love the way you put that, because the way you put that, it made it sound like I'm a bazillionaire. So the company that I was a cog at was bought by another company. So I went from being a cog to being a cog. I'm just a schlub slaving away, trying to understand what good selling and buying and marketing looks like. So, but all good. If I made any money off that deal, as much as I love you guys, I don't know if I'd be here. I'd be in Mallorca or something. I've never been to Mallorca. I don't know if I'd want to actually be there, but I'm super excited to be with you guys today and share some thoughts and sort of what I see. Some of this will be residual research that I was working on with the team at Gartner before my departure in May. Some of it's sort of picking up from there. I think there's a huge opportunity for those of us, which is all of us here today, thinking about customers, because I think everything's got to be, it's so interesting to me. So for the last 20 years, we've all been trying to solve for selling or solve for marketing. And I think what we need to do, that the switch we all have to make, is solve for buying as opposed to solve for selling. And maybe even more importantly is to solve for deciding. So I think we can pick it up, Bill, wherever you want to go, but eventually I'm going to come back to things like customers' confidence in their ability to make decisions on behalf of their company is going to be like this drum beat that I'm about to pound for the next 30, 40 minutes or so. So we can dig in wherever you guys want.
Awesome. I would just add to our little exchange before, my friend, it's your name of the book. So you definitely are a player and a heavy player in this space. There's no question about that. So yeah, let's start there. I would love to start there. And let me sort of set the stage a little bit here. We think our job in customer marketing, as well as customer success, is to help customers to understand what they're buying from you. Mm-hmm. Right? That's what it's all about. And that works when you've got a single buyer and it's assumed it's a relatively simple process. You find you find the thought leader or the decision maker. It's your customer, and you sell them, and boom, you've got a deal. Yeah. And that's gone. That's way gone. As you point out in your books, Brent, mm-hmm. There's something like 5.4 people that you have to deal with and please and get on board to make these purchases. And here's the deal. Obviously this is complex to us, but it's also complex to the buyer. They're trying to figure out how to figure this. They're trying to figure out how to do this within their own organizations because it's complex. So that's where Brent has been working, and he still is working there, I'm happy to say. And this is an opportunity, I think, for our folks to be of great help here. Brent, feel free to expand on that if you'd like.
Sure. And Ari's got a question about internal champions. So I see it, Ari, and I just want to acknowledge it. Well, I imagine we'll come around to that, but it may be easier if we take a running start and work through a couple other points to get to the champions point. So Bill, if we kind of take a snapshot of the landscape, I was just doing this I was on with a bunch of MBAs at the University of Alabama just a couple hours ago with her and kind of walked them through it this way. You know, we talk a lot right now about this unrelenting period of uncertainty that we have been through and continue to be in, find ourselves in over the last 3 years, whether it's in, the pandemic, of course, supply chain disruptions. Now, of course, is largely economic uncertainty, political upheaval, or at least disruption, war in Europe. I mean, it's endless and it's ceaseless. And I think that one of the things we have to think about sales marketing success, irrespective of function, is just the degree to which customers are uncertain in their ability to make decisions now, just because of the chop that's on the water, as it were, things being so unsettled. I would argue, if I may, based on a lot of work that I've done over the years and with others and very smart people, I think that's actually almost like a distraction. Don't get me wrong; these are real challenges and they're incredibly important. But in many ways, I think the forces that I think are undermining customers' confidence in themselves and their ability to make decisions on behalf of their company is not about whether or not we're going to have a recession or there's a great resignation or there's quiet quitting. It's three things. There's three major forces eroding customers' confidence in their ability to make decisions. One is decision complexity, one is information overload, and one is what I would call value opacity. So we're not really sure how we should go about making decisions. We're really struggling to make sense out of all the really great information that's out there, put out there, by the way, by marketers trying to be thought leaders. And we really struggle to understand the value of the decisions we're making, either because we don't understand the value provider, we don't really understand the outcomes we're seeking to achieve. So all of this, I think, comes back to, I think, our opportunity in marketing, in sales, in success, in customer-led marketing, and product-led marketing, you name it, whatever function we might be in, is to find ways to help customers feel not more confident in us as a supplier, not more confident in us, our product, our solution, our brand, or the fact that we were founded in the back of a pickup in 1869. It's not that. That's not where customers are concerned. Where customers are concerned is in their own ability to say, have we looked at have we even asked the right questions? Have we looked at enough information? Have we looked at the right information? Are we even aligned to what we're trying to do? Are we going to be able to implement whatever it is we bought? There's a lot of self-doubt out there. And it's, again, not driven by, are we headed into a recession? It's driven by, just to your point, the complexity of the decisions that we're now making on behalf of our companies. And so I would take that as a backdrop. I think it's really interesting to explore, particularly in customer advocacy, customer-led marketing, what happens as a discipline for us in customer marketing when we put everything through the lens of customer confidence. That is, how can we help customers feel more confident in their ability to make big decisions on behalf of their company? And I think there's a number of things that we could be doing in customer marketing or customer-led marketing that would be hugely helpful in that regard.
And Brent, let's dive into that decision complexity and because we all know, both of us have done a lot of buyer research, so we understand where they're coming from, and we tend to think of it as one decision, right? Are they going to buy our software or not? But the decision, it's actually a series of many micro decisions along the way that these buyers have to make, both before they purchase and then even after the purchase. And so I wanted to, could you give us some color, like at some of the earlier stage, what some of those decision points are where they're lacking the most confidence, because then we can talk a little bit later about how customer marketing can start to fill those gaps.
Well, so Jeff, it's interesting. Your question, as great as it is, implies, and purposefully or not, a certain linearity to this process. So when you say things like early, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So that one of the things we found in our work at Gartner, the best way to think about a buying journey, because in marketing, we've been talking about mapping the customer's buying journey for, I don't know, 15 years, right? And so generally we think about it as, you start with problem identification, you identify a problem, you explore solutions, you build requirements, you select a supplier, and basta, you're done. And that could take 6 months, it could take 6 years, it could be hard, it could be easy. The thing that we found, and this is Gartner data, so I was involved in creating it, but it's Gartner IP. So I just want to make sure that I source my sources now. But one of the things we found while working at Gartner is that customers don't move through those stages in any sort of linear process. In other words, what happens is, as you identify a problem, you say, okay, this is the problem. that we need to go after? First of all, there's huge debate around that. I think this is the problem. Well, you think that's the problem. Or more likely, it's a prioritization. I think this is problem number 4 on a list of 2 things we should do. You think it's problem number 2 on a list of 3 things. It's like, where does it rank? So, and all of a sudden we think we get all that settled. We begin to go off and explore solutions, and what happens? Well, in exploring solutions, we realize, oh, we didn't quite scope the problem right. We got to go back and revisit the problem. Or someone else gets involved and says, oh, you're looking at this solution. I want to be involved in that. And they say, but it's got to fix this. One or another, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And so when you map this out as a diagram, it's that very famous, I think it's pretty well known. Let's put it that way. It's a pretty well known diagram that we built at Gartner. It's designed by my dear friend Martha Mathers, who's now a CMO in her own right, which we often refer to as the spaghetti bowl. It's simply a picture of just arrows and lines. And for those who remember, like Alice's Restaurant from the 70s, like the arrows and lines, a paragraph in the back of each one, right? It's just a big visual mess that is meant to be an illustrative depiction of a typical B2B buying journey. And I have yet to show that to any marketer or head of sales around the world who doesn't look at it and say, oh, tell me about it. It's one of those, it's one of the most visceral images we've ever created. Because whether you've been on the selling side, marketing side, or you're on the buying side, you look at it and think, ugh, it's just exhausting to look at, but we all know it, Jeff, because we've all been there. Right. Do you know what I mean? And right. I think that's a critical point to think about. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, so we know it's not linear, and we know that it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, maybe 3 steps back. But there are some things that tend to happen earlier when you're trying to make sure your organization is even ready to solve a particular problem or things like that, versus when you're doing security reviews of each vendor, of a vendor solution.
Well, actually, if I may, let me actually take your idea, and I guess this is the challenge of me. I can't. I'm going to reframe it just a little bit, but I'm with you. We're actually violent agreement with one nuance, which is, well, here, let me back up a little bit. When you look at that spaghetti bowl diagram. Mm-hmm. I often ask, particularly marketers, this question when looking at that diagram. I'll say, who's in a better position to know what the slide looks like for your customers? Is it you or your customers? And almost invariably, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, it's our customers. It's their buying process. We're kind of so that's why we go find a guide. This goes back a little bit, Ari, to your question about the champion. I need to find a champion or a guide inside the customer organization to help me map out that mess of a spaghetti bowl so that I can go on that journey with you. I would humbly submit, after years and years of doing this, that in many ways, who's in a better position to know what that slide or that page or that picture looks like for your customers? It's not your customers, it's you, the supplier, because your customers are going through it for the first time, or the first time in a long time, certainly with new people. Whereas you, not as an individual, but as a company, have gone on this journey with the other customers multiple times, hopefully in the last several quarters, weeks, whatever it might be. And so that then is the opportunity, Jeff. So your point is, certain things, it's not that certain things must happen or do happen earlier than others. Rather, I would suggest certain things should happen earlier. In other words, to make your life easier, to make this more manageable, to make this feel less awful, then we would suggest to do it in this order. So the phrase, I literally come back to this phrase 10 times a day in my own life and in conversations like this. It's something like this: in working with other customers like you, one of the things that we found is, and so it's in this case, Jeff, to your question, it sounded like this, and boy, this is an opportunity for all of you in customer marketing, because I'll put it all together. In working with other customers like you, one of the things we found is procurement's going to have to sign off on this deal. But generally speaking, they get involved really late. And when they get involved late, they tend to blow things up, and it just drives everyone crazy. And you're going to be really, really frustrated. So we would suggest, based on what we've learned from other companies, is that you probably actually want to pull them in early. And when you pull them in early, they're going to have 3 questions you're going to have to answer. And here's those questions. And in fact, just to make your life a little bit easier, we've provided you an answer to those questions that are most popular based on the other companies like you that we've worked with. And we've put it in a note just to make your life. So see what I'm doing? I'm actually taking my customer figuratively, at least by the hand, and I'm guiding them step by step through I'm mapping their buying journey. Rather than saying, give me the map of your journey, I'm mapping the journey for them. And this, I think, is one of the real opportunities for customer marketing, is to do that work. One head of marketing, a CMO, I was sharing this with one time, so how am I supposed to know that? So go ask your customers. Well, how do I talk to them? So we go have a conversation with them. So I can't do that. We said, why? Because sales won't let me. So go, whether you do this through focus groups or surveys or win-loss analysis or talking to your sales reps, map the minefield. Where are the places that this customer decision process likely goes off the rails, and how can I turn that into a coaching guide based on social proof, other companies like you, and here's what they wish they do. One of the best questions you guys could ask in your customer surveys for happy customers is this: if you had to go on this purchase journey all over again, what would you do differently? Or if you were to give a piece of advice to some other company about to embark on the same purchase journey, what advice would you give them to make their life easier? That's your guys' job. Or at least that's your opportunity as a group, I think, is to go find that out and share that with your customers.
Could I just butt in here a little bit? If anybody,
It's your show, Bill.
but I'm just a very polite guy. Would anybody here in the audience care to comment on what Brent was just talking about? Love to hear from you guys. What do you think of that?
I mean, I will say that I have never seen more success than what Brent is talking about right now. And I think, you know, in shorthand, what I wrote in the chat versus what I meant are a little different. What I wrote in the chat is helping create, we used to create these welcome packs and sales packs, buyer packages that would literally take our prospects and customers through the process, what we've seen others do to be successful. And what I mean by turning them into internal champions is let them be the hero of the story. You teach them how to do that. And once you do that, once they become an internal champion, the value recognition receival is there, guess what? They're going to be an external champion as well, right? Once you make them an internal hero, they turn to an external. So I couldn't be in more alignment from seeing real world reactions of like who our best advocates are. They start in this process. So we're talking post-sale experience, and it starts now.
So, sorry, Harry, just to confirm, it sounds like you're talking about once they become a customer, right?
No.
You do everything to make them succeed, and you bring in other customers.
No. Once they're in the sales prospect cycle. So once they're in a sales cycle, whatever the cycle is, that's not what they're experiencing. You basically coach them on how to be the champion, to bring it all together, to align, not to make 50 different types of visions of what we're solving for, but to align on a singular message. But we will create, like, how do you create internal messages? How do you create videos to get adoption? How do you do the change management? How do you prepare for the buying cycle? Like all of that to help them with and connect them with others who've gone through the buying cycle to make them champions, right? Those are the ones, because if they can rally everyone internally in the buying cycle, they're going to be more empowered to do that on the adoption cycle once they buy.
Right.
And on the adoption cycle, again, after that, on the advocacy cycle, right?
And Ari, if I may, real quick, because it's such a great, I love that you're sharing this. Thank you. Is when you say the word champion, just to be clear, because it's implicit, let's make it explicit. It's not that they're being a champion of you, your company, or your product. They're being a champion of an outcome or a solution or an endpoint. In other words, the champion is almost supplier agnostic.
Yes.
You're tying yourself and your product to the thing they're championing, but it's not you that they're championing per se. Did I get that right?
Yeah, the best way I would say is you're making them the hero of their own story.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think though, what you're also saying, Mary, is that once you do that with a buyer and they become a customer and so forth, they're probably likely to become an advocate for you because you were there with these very tough questions that nobody else has been helping them with, and you're there doing that. Is that right, Ari?
I have yet to see one who hasn't become an advocate.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real emotional attachment. You're helping somebody in a crisis. My God, how do I work this big complex organization that I'm in? How do I do it? And you come along and you help them, and it's authentic. You know, it's not like a guise, you know, for selling. It's like you're really helping them navigate their own organization.
Yeah, you're creating friends for life, and everyone's got each other's backs. I mean, it's a win-win-win. Everybody grows together. I love what Brent's talking about here.
No.
If I could, Jenny asked in the chat. So Jenny, I'll give it to you one more time because I do find these are really helpful questions. So to get to where Ari is and the story that he's telling, one needs to be able to identify what's hard about buying in the first place. In other words, it's hard for me to equip you to be that kind of champion unless I know where you're likely going to struggle. So the first thing we got to figure out is where are they likely going to struggle. So that's where you go out and ask other companies who've gone, you know, probably customers, because they're the ones you probably have easy contact to, customers who've just bought your solution. But you could do others. If you do win-loss, you could do it through third parties or focus groups. But let's keep it easy. For customers that have managed to successfully make it to the finish line and buy and ultimately implement your solution or a solution like yours, ask, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently to make it easier? Or if you were to give some advice to another company about to embark on the same solution, what would you tell? What did you learn from the process that you would share with others? What advice would you give them? And again, it's not advice about using our product or using our solution. It's literally advice on just making the pain of buying a little less. That's really what you're focused on.
And let me just add, because maybe a better way of framing the question I originally asked is I believe that the buying process is actually a subset of a bigger problem-solving process. And there are phases or things that people think about before they even enter buying mode, where they've just discovered that there's this major problem, or this problem has been lingering for years and it's just been swept under the rug. And somebody is saying, I wonder if this is my responsibility to fix, or if I could be a hero. And so they start to think about things like, is my company ready to even address this problem? Have other people solve this problem? And I'll give you a real life example. Is one of my clients is a cloud ERP vendor, and like nobody wants to replace their ERP system unless they're in a world of hurt. And so they realize that they're not even getting into sales cycles in a lot of places because people are just saying, no, we're just going to stick with what we have. And one way to address that from a customer marketing perspective is, imagine if you had your customers not just talking about why they love you, which is what we're used to doing, but talking about what was it that convinced you that you couldn't live another day with your former solution and had to make a change, right? I mean, an insight like that, it really helps them create urgency so that people move from being maybe stuck to now, well, maybe we should enter a buying cycle and actually try to solve this problem.
Jeff, on that point, there's a really, so my co-author on the Challenger Sale is a friend of mine named Matt Dixon. We're still friends. And Matt and another former colleague of ours, a guy named Ted McKenna. So Matt and Ted have just come out with a new book. I think it's on the shelves now or in the next 2 weeks. It's called The Jolt Effect, Jolt, like jolting you out of status quo. The only reason I love making plugs for Matt's book, but actually, I promise it's germane here, because actually the reason I'm mentioning it here, Jeff, is because Matt and Ted make a very interesting data-backed argument in this book, which is, when it comes to status quo, there's actually two different things you need to solve for. One is exactly what you just said, which is how do I get customers off the status quo? So how do I teach them, as we used to say in Challenger land, how do I teach them that the pain of same is actually greater than the pain of change? Like, here's why you need to change. Here's what it's like, I know you don't want to do this, but here's why what you're doing now is a horrible, horrible idea. It's a total cost of status quo, all that kind of stuff. So what that does is get your customers to wake up and say, I need to do something different. What Matt and Ted have found in their research is that's about 40% of the problem. You know what the bigger problem is? 60% is, no, I want to change. I just don't feel confident in my ability to make that happen. So in other words, if I keep going back and beating up on the status quo one more time, it's like, no, dude, you had me at hello. I know I need to change. And so what's interesting is the data shows you can actually, there's a threshold where you want to get someone off of status quo, get them open to change, but then you need to move on to how to change. Because if you keep going back and beating up on the status quo yet one more time, you actually create dissonance. Like, dude, I get it. I don't know if they say dude, but it's like, yeah, I get it. I need to change. So now the question becomes, how do I get there? Which is this buyer enablement idea we were just talking about. It's like, so how do I feel confident to herd the cats in my organization, to make sure the implementation goes well, that we get the value that we think we want to get out of it. And so just wanting to change isn't enough to actually do the change, if that makes sense.
Right. And so you're actually answering that question that I originally asked, because you just named 2 points in the problem solving cycle. One is, should we make a change? Another one is, do I have the confidence to even take this on? I mean, is it going to help my career or not? Is it important enough a problem to solve or not for the company? Do we have way too many other priorities to be thinking about at this time? If it is important enough, what approaches are there to solving a problem like this? Do I hire more people? Do we hire a consulting firm? Do we buy technology? There's all kinds of those. Those are what I call kind of the micro decisions along the way that really cause the complexity to be there, to take away the confidence that people have, especially if they've never been down a journey like this before.
Agreed. Agreed. So now here's what's interesting in my mind. So, and we often rely on our sales reps to have those conversations. And why I wish they were better at it. I wish they wouldn't talk about speeds and feeds. I wish they wouldn't show up and throw up. Sorry for the phrase, but here's and all that is true. But for this audience in this group in our time today, what I get really intrigued about is why couldn't we do everything you just said on digital through a digital self-serve experience? Why, when I go to your website, in fact, for that matter, our website, could I not find those questions in a structured way? Like, you need to make a change, but you're afraid how to get started. Take your point about the readiness checklist. We used to profile it like, are you ready to go on the journey? Click here to find out. And there's a 5-question checklist for readiness, for change readiness. There's here's the top 5 questions you'll need to be able to answer to know if you're ready to go forward. There's all sorts of things you could put in the self-serve channel to help solve for customers' confidence to move forward, to the point where even you may not need the sales rep at all, or at least not until much later, right? To negotiate a price.
Even
I think that's super
with,
interesting.
Even do it all with something like video. I think
Yeah.
that has a few
Oh,
ideas.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I want the people in our audience, I mean, they're all going to agree that those types of decision points and the uncertainty and the lack of confidence, even though a great rep can say, in our experience, here's how we've helped others, what they really want to hear about, or who they really want to hear from at that point, is how have others just like them and companies just like theirs and roles just like theirs solving a similar problem, how have they gone about doing it?
Yes.
And so that's why I say, even in that self-service mode, we just need to be thinking, not just comparing our product and why did they select our product versus another product, which is often where we start, to further upstream. I agree it's not linear, but it is a little bit upstream, when they're having some of these preliminary challenges and confidence gaps that we can help by kind of expanding the types of insights we gather from our customers.
So now, for everyone on the call again, I'm so excited about this audience, because you guys get to do, there's so many there's like greenfield, there's so many opportunities for you guys to do things differently. So let's talk about customer testimonials in this context. This may seem like an obvious point now that we've gone where we've gone, but even about 10 years ago, we found one company doing this, and I've seen others now since. But as you guys think about the customer testimonial video or the customer testimonial document or whatever it might be, it's almost always the customer testifies, as it were, to the value they got from your solution, how much they love, the raving fans. Oh my God, I love these guys. And we got $7 million off of a $1 million investment, or all those things are good. I'm not necessarily suggesting you shut any of that down, but notice that's not what we're talking about now. Imagine if I go onto your website and there's someone like me in my role, the title I recognize and the company I recognize, saying, if I had to do it all over again, here's 3 things. How did we know we were ready? Here's how we knew we were ready. So in other words, this is where you use, instead of using customer testifiers, think of them as almost like customer coaches. So you bring them in to be the third party, objective, socially normed, that is people like me, telling me how to go on the journey. I think is just so much incremental opportunity there for all the videos and content that we produce around testifying, as it were.
So we got another question from Ari.
Well, I want to say, it's 3 years ago, Bill, at your conference, right? Right before COVID, right at the beginning of COVID, Jeff sat down with me and taught me about customer canvases. And I feel like this really plays into the go-to-market approach of capturing testimonials, where you're solving for an actual specific problem. You're reinforcing a problem. What I wanted to add to what Brent was saying was I found that in helping them become these internal heroes of their own stories and capturing it, you also have to help them with a major thing that I've seen help in the buying cycle, whether a prospect or a customer buying more, is how to navigate blockers, right? And capturing stories from others who have solved the same blocking. And I'll give, just for everyone on the call, I'll give a specific example. We had a customer who wanted to buy us, and because we have in-house chat functionality, you have in-product chat ability, there was someone at that company who was, without saying why they were blocking, was asking questions like, well, do you have the business case fully worked out? What are the total hours in? Asking really large questions that are next to impossible to answer, but will slow any buying cycle down as you try and prove these out. Well, it turns out it's because they owned their internal fiefdom. They owned the chat functionality of Intercom, and they didn't want that to compete. because they had gone through pricing negotiation with Intercom for 3 years in a row. It was this major contract. They owned it. It was their like kind of glue in the company. And here was this functionality that was going to come in and do all these other things and also do chat as well. So it was a direct compete. Well, a great thing, like you're talking about testimonials here, it's excellent to have another customer who's gone through a similar blockage like this, and how that you actually work together, and Intercom is empowered by this. So it's just, I just want to point out that blockers are a major part of this process, and capturing stories and documenting when you get those wins around those blockers and what those stories are is incredibly powerful.
Yep.
I'd agree, Ari. It's such a great point. Yeah.
I'd be curious, Ari, do you have an example where you had a blocker and you and your prospect who was a go or whatever figured out a way to deal with that
Yeah,
give an example.
It was the Intercom story.
Oh,
it was the Intercom story. We got around it by empowering Intercom and showing how the two actually work together, right? But that person, that blocker, and the buyer, here's a perfect example. The buyer didn't realize that's why they were blocking. I was the one who fished that out, and I had some internal knowledge about this and was able to understand it, but the buyer didn't get why this person was being such a blocker to them. So she was digging and she's trying a bunch of different angles, but she couldn't figure it out. And she's like, he just keeps throwing in resistance, or it wasn't even directly through him. Sometimes he was sending it through his direct reports. And the direct report, and I'm like, well, let's trace this all back to where this is stemming from. And okay, so you're running Intercom. And so we were able to dissect that. And then once we were able to empower what that actually looked like and beef that up, then we were able to get the blessing. And so we created a whole story around, right, the convergence of these two technologies.
that's a great example. I want to share one very quickly. It's one of my favorite examples of dysfunctional silos. And then Howard, I see you, buddy. We're going to have you next. Just very, very, very quickly. I won't name the name of the company, and they're not the only one that's had this happen, but their customer community, she had wanted to open up her customer community to support, to diverting support costs, expensive, paid, support costs. Let's start diverting them to the customer community, kind of like Microsoft did way, way back in the day with Sean O'Driscoll. We'd like to do that too. And guess what? It makes all the sense in the world. It saves a ton of money. And guess what? Guess who blocked that, who tends to block that idea? 3 guesses. The support function.
Yeah, you're going to need
The
fewer of
support
us.
people.
Right.
Right? That's the way it works. That's the way that's a lot of times people say that's the way business works. And my response to that is no, that's the way business doesn't work. That's not working. So yeah. Howard, jump in, buddy.
Do you notice on both these stories the very human connection? These aren't like an ROI calculator doesn't solve for either one of those stories, does it?
Yeah. And you talk about that.
Yeah.
You talk about that in our pre-call.
Yeah.
I am so aligned with that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Howard. I want to hear. We've been talking about Howard for 4. Go ahead, Howard.
No, it's fine. Look, all of this is people-based, people and process-based. It's not the technology problems are minuscule compared to the people and process aspects of this, and that's kind of where I want to go with my question, Brett. I've been on other webinars with you. I've read your stuff. I'm a big believer in buyer enablement, and the need to shift one's thinking from sales enablement or revenue enablement to buyer enablement.
Oh, right? I like that. I like that.
The challenge I find is wherever I go to talk to people about this, they can't get their head out of the sales enablement perspective. They see everything through that lens. So I'm wondering a couple of things. Have you seen companies who've made this shift successfully? And what were the arguments? I'm not looking so much for the questions, but what were the points of value to them that caused them to be willing to kind of shake off that traditional way of doing things and take a totally different perspective, because what you've defined all along is a change in what sales has to do.
100%. Yeah.
And,
In fact,
all
one
your
of the
work.
of the last lines that I wrote, I tend to write what were called bumper stickers, which are little phrases that capture big ideas, right? And it's funny in sales in particular, Howard, to your point is, pardon the analogy, but I think you all go with me on this journey. So heads of sales have this tendency, and if ever to define their value and their worth by the size of the sales force that they manage. So you have chief sales officer say, well, I manage a team of 50 people. And this was, well, I manage a team of 500 people. And then Tyrone Edwards will walk on the stage, former head of sales at Merck, and he'll say, I used to manage as head of sales organization, 15,000 people. And everyone goes, oh my God, Tyrone's amazing, right? So but the point out of all that was, I said, we're living in a world now where I think heads of sales have to define themselves not as the head of sales, or the head of sellers, but as the head of selling, because so much of selling happens not through the channel of sellers. I moved away from that only because I think it's still turf battle based, right? It's still about so we wrote that for the sales practice because it was kind of pandering to chief sales officers. But if you step back and go from a first principles perspective as a clean sheet of paper and say, if I were to build the commercial organization of today, I don't think it would have sales and marketing, to be totally honest. And I realize that's not realistic for most companies. I just get it. But so Howard, let me answer your question specifically. The two thoughts. One is Bill mentioned an article that we put online through, I wrote for HBR back in January, which they gave the rather provocative title to. I didn't title it, but it said sales and marketing are becoming obsolete. And we can tag that and get it out to you guys. But it basically is a step-by-step way to make that argument, Howard, but it's a story of a company called Smart Technologies. Smart Technologies is a Canadian-based company. They're actually owned by Foxconn. They're in the educational technology industry. So if you've got kids in school, they might have used what are called smart boards, or the big TV screens on the wall with the projectors and all that kind of stuff. That's the business that Smart's in. I call them former, they're still there, but the former chief marketing officer, Jeff Lowe, the former chief sales officer at Smart, Jenna Pipchuk. Jenna and Jeff know each other. I've known them for years. I just talked to Jeff on Friday, actually, and they're still going gangbusters on this. They, through our research, their own experience, they built out an argument, Howard, that basically said customers, so some of the Gartner research around, 72% of customers said that they'd prefer not to talk to a sales rep at all, engaging in buying a solution. We know that, somewhere between, the numbers have changed a little bit from 17 in the article depth. It actually went up in the pandemic to about 20, but somewhere between 17 and 20% of buying time is actually spent talking to supplier sales reps. The rest of that 80 to 83% of time with buyers is not spent talking to sales reps. And by the way, that's all sales reps, not just your sales rep. The point of all, there's a broad argument to be made that effectively the surface area, if you like that metaphor, that your sellers have to that customer buying. So where does our sales opportunity match up to the buying process? And there's decreasing amount of surface area there where the two connect. And yet your customers are still engaged in a buying process the whole time. As much of that's happening, of course, digitally through digital channels. And the stories that we've been sharing up to this point, I think, are the same. It's not just they lack confidence when talking to sellers, they lack confidence on your digital website, on Amazon. I was like, what Smart did is they said, let's clean sheet it. Let's go with first principles. Let's ask ourselves, what are the buying jobs that our customers have to complete to their satisfaction in order to make a purchase decision happen? This is Bob Mesta stuff. So if you guys don't know Bob Mesta, it's a weird spelling. It's a German spelling. It's Moesta, Moesta, Bob Mesta. Bob is the guy that worked with Clay Christensen on the Jobs to Be Done work that was in Harvard Business Review. So Bob is Clay. I never knew Clayton. I say him as if I knew Clay. I never knew Clay. I really never knew, but he's passed. But Bob is still around. We worked with Bob at CB pretty closely on this Jobs to Be Done approach and applied it to B2B. And so Smart saw that work. They saw this data. And Howard, what they did is they identified, I'm going on a little bit, it's all in the article, so I'll just try and sum it up, but we can dig in, you can follow up questions if you want. But what they did is they took all of sales, all of marketing, all of success, and all of service, and essentially they took away everyone's roles. So no one, there is no sales anymore. There's no marketing, there's no success. No one has a role anymore. And then they said, okay, here's the 5 buying jobs that we as a company need to support our customers in completing to their side. And there was an educate job. There was a trial job. It's pretty straightforward stuff. It wasn't super magical, crazy physics, right? They said, okay, this configuration of people on our team at Smart is now on the learn team. All right, you guys over here, you're on the purchase team. You guys over here are on the implementation team. So they reorganized everyone in the commercial organization around one of these 5 buying jobs. You were tagged to one of those buying jobs. And then the way they go to market is in any geographical region, they have what they call a pod. And on that pod are members from each of those different buying jobs. And it's their goal collect, and they're all, then they create, and they call this the unified commercial engine, the UCE. And they all run off of one dashboard, is it with a unified commercial engine dashboard. And they're all measured collectively as a team on their ability to help customers complete those buying jobs. It's not radically different. No one lost their job. They didn't expand or contract. They just reconfigured. And some people are going to say, it's funny because Howard, some people look at it and say, oh, other companies have been doing this for years. It's just cross silo collaboration. They technically would say they don't have silos anymore. So they feel like they've gone past it rhetorically. Most people look at that and say, I could never do that. It's like, I could, and they it's funny because I could never do that because they're big. And then other people say, I could never do that because they're small. I could never do that because they're tech. I could never, the reasons, I was talking to Jeff about this on Friday. And I think it's all a bunch of red herrings because what they're doing is hard. I mean, it's dismantling legacy silos, which is hard. I think there's two reasons why they were able to do it. One is because their CEO looked at the very thing you were asking about, Howard. What is the business case for doing this? And their CEO, Nicholas, is a really smart guy, looked at and said, yes, we have to do this. And so I think that's when you start talking about this kind of decision, that's who makes this decision. It's not a head of sales decision. This is a CEO decision. And the second, tongue in cheek, but I think it's true. I think they were able to do it because they're Canadian, and Canadians just trust each other. Because literally, because all jokes, I asked Jeff and Jen, I said, how are you able to do this? Because essentially it's existential. You've been Jeff's one of the smartest marketers I've ever known. I mean, if you guys want just a genius B2B marketer, Jeff Lowe at Smart, and he's great at it. And he's the one that said, Brent, we don't have marketing anymore. How does one of the smartest marketers you've ever met tell you we don't have marketing anymore? Because he's one of the smartest marketers you've ever met, right? But it's existential for him. But it wasn't. And I said, how did you guys do this? And he literally, I was on a webinar like this where I was asking him, I was interviewing for our colleagues at Gartner. And I bleep you not, Howard. You know what they said? He said, we did it because we trust each other. Isn't that crazy? To your point about humanity?
But it goes right back to where we started this whole discussion. It all
sure
about
does.
people. And I was chatting. It's so funny because the way I asked my question, I left off the part about jobs to be done because I was chatting with Tony Olwick last night. And Tony's an ex-IBMer like I am. So we knew each other back in the day. And I was just looking at some of his stuff saying, okay, that ties in with the whole buyer enablement discussion because you got to look at it from a jobs to be done perspective. So this is great. I really appreciate the comments. One last follow-up on this.
Yeah.
Do you see any way to accelerate the emergence of this thinking?
Yeah.
Because it's so slow.
I maddeningly, right? So just to be clear, I think what the team at Smart did is right for Smart. I'm not suggesting the only way or even the best way to do this is for everyone to first principle dismantle everything and rebuild. I just think it's super intriguing that they had the guts to do it. A lot of the work at Gartner, for example, I talk a lot about Gartner because that's the world I know. Jeff, if you want to speak to Forrester, we were both like defrocked at, analysts from big companies. But there's a lot of talk, and there's a lot of talk elsewhere around revenue operations or RevOps and creating these sort of. For me, it doesn't feel like the answer is going to be structural. It's like a new org structure is not going to solve for this. I think it's a mentality more than anything else. For me, I think, Howard, the question is, how can I make these kinds of motions or activities in our organization happen despite our structure, not as a result of it? Is probably the quicker way to get there. But that means we collectively, as a commercial team, have to believe that we have to, believe that solving for customer buying is our number one priority, which seems like everyone will say yes, but no one will know what it means. And then we have to make it concrete. So I have to understand this is why I started what I did on this call today. I think we need to have a very articulate understanding of how exactly customers are struggling, not to buy, but to decide. Because if we can understand where it gets hard to make decisions around information overload, around decision complexity, around value opacity, then irrespective of our functional areas, we can begin to think individually and collectively around how would I solve for customers struggling with decision complexity? How would I solve for customers struggling with information overload and so on? That's the way I go after it.
Brent, could I hazard a response?
Thanks, Brent.
Yeah.
And thanks, Howard. That was awesome. And please stay in the conversation here. So here's my suggestion. To think bigger than that, Brent. I don't think it's just about the customer's buying process.
Yeah.
That's part of a bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I think what the bigger picture is, you need a CEO who's made the decision that our purpose, our reason for being a company is that we need to it's customers all the way. Our customers are our most important thing.
Yeah.
You know, we place the greatest importance above everything to loving our customers. Fred Reichelt is now the Mr. Net Promoter Score, Mr. Bain Consulting, about as dry as you can get kind of consulting. He says it's about loving your customer, and he's not religious. He's not even religious.
You know, Bill, here's what I'm with you. I'm 1000% with you. But my struggle is that, I mean, show me a CEO who doesn't say that. I mean, we all go through the motions of saying our customers are critical, our customers are at the center of everything, our customers. So, but like when it comes to brass tacks, we just rerun the same old playbook. You know what I mean? That's where I get frustrated.
That's the problem. If they're running the same playbook, if they take their purpose statement and stick it in a drawer, the question is, are they living it? Are they putting it in their, are they hiring people based on that, based on their empathy, based on their
but I think teams need more tactical advice on what to actually do. You know, I think everyone would sign up and say, yes, customers are important, customers first. But okay, now I call it the Thursday morning test. It's Thursday morning, 9 o'clock. I just sat down at my desk virtually or in the office, and I'm customer first, and you got me all on board and put the customers. So what exactly do you want me to do differently, tactically? That's where I think the rubber hits the road and where this actually gets important.
I mean, you know, there's a few steps here, but one of them is hire people who actually care about their customers, want them to succeed, wants them to be successful. That's one step. And then it's like, you know, celebrating those customers who do an extraordinary job of this, like your net promoters, like net promoter scores. Most people that implement net promoter score are doing it for the number. They want to brag about their metric. You know, we've got a 45 net promoter score. Isn't that great? But they're not looking, and a lot of times those are rigged, essentially. But they're not really looking at the underlying interactions with employees and customers. And you celebrate those where they really, really do these things. And I don't know if you've seen Fred's new book, Winning on Purpose. He's got a bunch of case studies of companies that came into markets that are poorly served by they're poorly served with their customer base, and companies like Sprint, who go into this to like cell phones, you know, wireless. Yeah. And they sell a crappy, Verizon, AT&T, and so forth. All these practices they have to rip off the customer and so forth. They said, we're going to do the opposite of that. We're going to care for our customers. We're going to give them a fair deal. They don't have to watch their back, and so forth. And I actually was so impressed. I switched to Sprint. And I'm loving it. They don't pull these tricks on me. So they genuinely care about. They have a culture.
So Bill, I'm with you. So a lot of CX executives will work on this kind of stuff, and I think it's great to do this with customer experience. But still, if I may, I think it's only half the coin, because notice everything you just said is denominated in customers, but it's still denominated in customers' perceptions of us. Man, they love us. They take it. They trust us. And this is what we always default to. How do we change the way customers think about us? Are they satisfied with us? Do they think we're better than the competition? It's like that old dating thing. It's like, enough about me. Now you talk about me. It's like, we just can't help ourselves. Right. And I think the thing that we tend to overlook as a result is, how do customers think about themselves? It's truly an empathetic perspective of saying, because when you ask leaders, as I have all over the world, think back to a recent purchase in your own organization. Think about the people involved. Think about the steps you had to go through. Now, if you had to pick one word, one adjective to describe that journey, what would that word be? And they all say the same thing: long, hard, frustrating, awful, gross. And one said, I never want to do that again. That was her word. And it's not, she said, I never want to buy from that company again. It's like, I never want to go through this awful hell with my own colleagues of making a decision on which CRM system to buy, whether it's which product A or product B. How do we help our customers feel less awful about change? This is, by the way, so colleagues of mine, friends at Gartner, right before I left, Howard, back to your point about change, about buyer enablement. Sharon is the head researcher on the Sharon Kentor Cuervist, expanded the scope of that work from buyer enablement to change enablement. And I think that's where this stuff gets really, really interesting, is how can I help my customers feel more confident? This goes back, Jeff, to a point you were making, to go on a change journey, irrespective of us, right? Because everything we sell, I keep coming back to the same thing in my career in this is we all sell the same thing. We all sell change. Whether it's getting our customer to stop buying this and start buying that, or stop buying from them, start buying from us, or stop doing it yourself, outsource to us, stop buying the small amount and buy the big amount, the old tech for the new tech. And this is what's the one thing customers want to avoid at all costs? Change, because it's hard and frustrating along. And so that's the thing, is how can we help our customers? It goes back to, was it Gordon, I think was your point, is it's not even a buying journey, it's a change journey. And it's about deciding more than buying. I think that's, so anyway,
Brent,
I'll stop. I'm ranting a little bit. I'll
Sure.
stop. Sorry.
just-
Go ahead,
just a
Bill.
little-
Wait, I do want to jump in real quick, Bill.
Sure.
Yeah, Howard.
Brent, my first customer in 1978 at IBM was Somerset County College in Somerset, New Jersey. And the first thing the IT manager said to me was, I don't want any problems and I'm not making any changes. This
Exactly.
is a very long-standing problem.
That's a
Right.
great-
I'm not suggesting any of this is new. I think it's more complicated today because it's just gotten that much more complex with more people, more information. But yeah, that's the thing, Howard, is that customers don't struggle to decide because of the economy. They struggle to decide because of their humanity, right? I mean, this has been around for a long time, well, since humans.
So let me finish my point. I love that anecdote. But Brent, your question to me was, what tactically, from a tactical standpoint, what does that mean to being customer centric or to loving your customers, truly caring, blah, blah, blah. What does that mean? So I think, and then you came back to the problem of buying. The problem is back not with your organization. You guys are great. You're fine. Back at my, back at my job, at my work. And the answer is exactly what you're talking about. What you're talking about is a tactical response to companies that want to do that, that want to truly be customer-led and customer centric. So that's, I don't see the pushback or the problem with this notion. I don't think it's that complicated.
Well, Bill, I'll just tell you, and by the way, I have no idea if we need to be watching the clock or not, because I will literally go all afternoon on this. In my career,
Jeff.
One last thought, because it's on this point, Bill. The point I'm always worried about in all the research I do is what I call the false positive problem. When you set up an argument where people can say, oh, we do that already, or this confirms what we're already doing, chances are you haven't made a convincing enough case for your point. That's what I find, because I find it's like, oh, we're already customer centric. Yeah, but you're not doing this. So I would just caution everyone to watch for the false positive.
Right. So we're always very respectful of our attendees' times. A lot of people have to go to meetings. So Brent, I want to thank you. I wanted to see if is there maybe a 30-second summary, knowing that these are customer marketers who are responsible for helping fill that trust gap and confidence gap that exists by mobilizing their customers in a way to do that. Anything else you could think of that was a piece of wisdom?
The bumper sticker is simply your best opportunity is to help your customers feel more confident in themselves and their ability to make large-scale decisions on behalf of their company.
Awesome.
On bumper, man.
All right, everybody. Well, this was awesome. It was so great that we did not have much drop off. People were with us till the end. So obviously they were glued to this topic. Brent, thank you so much. And thank you, Ari, Howard, others for jumping in and sharing your views. We'll be sending a follow-up email with a recording to this, as well as just wanting to capture your thoughts about how you want to continue this discussion. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Cheers, all. Be well. Absolutely.
Good to see you, Howard. Ari, good to see you.